Hello and welcome back to another episode of ABA Mom. I'm Allie, and today I just want to talk to you about something that I think both parents, professionals would like to hear. So when people picture ABA therapy, they may picture a child sitting at a table, an RBT sitting across from them, data sheets, flashcards, timers, or something they say, first this, then that. And yes, structured teaching absolutely has its place, but some of the most meaningful opportunities to teach skills happen when nobody's looking from the outside would even realize that ABA is even happening. It happens when you're at Target and the toy wasn't available. It happens when their brother takes a controller, when they leave the playground. It happens when you're running 10 minutes late. Everybody needs shoes on. Everybody can't find their backpack, and your child has decided that right now is a perfect time to negotiate every decision that you ever made. That is real life. And even when you're teaching a skill that you're supposed to improve someone's life, eventually those skills have to work there too. So what do we actually mean by ABA? So sometimes ABA gets reduced to what it looks like instead of what we're actually doing. ABA isn't a particular table. It's not just a token board or a laminated visual. It's not therapists just sitting across from a child. It is the core. We're looking at behavior, the environment, what happens before and after behavior, and how we can arrange opportunities that help someone develop meaningful skills. So if I'm working with a child and requesting a break, I can certainly practice that during a structured activity. But what happens when they're 20 minutes in the grocery store and they're overwhelmed? I want to make sure that those skills are generalized. If we're teaching waiting, it's great that they can wait for 30 minutes during therapy, during like a table time activity. But what happens when mom is talking on the phone and they want to get her attention? Can they wait then? If we're teaching transition, it's wonderful that they can transition from one therapy activity to another. But what about leaving the playground? What if they turn off the tablet? Can they do that getting out of the pool? Can they stop playing with Legos because it's time for dinner? There's skills where some of those skills become meaningful. And not that it's not helpful to practice during discrete child training or some of the table time activities you might see. But we want to make sure that those skills are generalized, and it's great practice to have it in the natural environment and real life situations. Think about how many skills can naturally occur during one trip to the grocery store. You're walking through the store and your child sees their favorite snack. There's a communication opportunity. Maybe they appropriately ask for it. Maybe the answer is yes. Maybe it's no, or maybe it's not right now. Now we have the opportunity to practice tolerating an unavailable item or choosing an alternative. To get to the checkout line, now they're waiting. Someone's standing close to us. Now we're practicing personal space. The cashier says hello. There's an opportunity for social response. You ask your child to put something in the cart following directions. You realize you forgot something and have to go back 3 aisles. Unexpected change. There's probably more naturally occurring teaching opportunities in that 20-minute grocery trip than we could manufacture at the table. That doesn't mean we're turning grocery store shopping into a 2-hour therapy session. That's actually the opposite of what I'm talking about. They're recognizing opportunities that already exist. And it's really important when I say we can teach throughout everyday life. I don't mean that every second of a child's life needs to become an intervention. Kids need downtime. They need to play. They need to be silly. They need to make choices. They need interactions where nobody's collecting data on them. Sometimes a child should be able to sit on the couch and watch a movie without somebody deciding it's a perfect opportunity to run 10 trials. The goal isn't how much ABA can we squeeze into a child's day. The better question is, how can the skills we're teaching make this child's actual day easier, safe, more independent, more enjoyable? Those are very different questions. Functional communication is probably one of my favorite examples. We can practice, I want, help, break, stop, my turn. Can I have more? I don't want that. And that really varies on the level of communication that your child has, because that's going to vary for everyone. And communication can look different for different individuals. So whether that is through sign or whether that's pointing at items, there's some way that your child is able to communicate, even if it's not verbal or it's not verbal all the time. There's different ways that they can communicate some of their wants and needs. But we make decisions all the time, every day. We get up, we decide what clothes we're going to wear. We decide what we're going to eat. So it's important for us to advocate, to be able to make requests throughout the day. And it's also important for any individual and, our children to be able to communicate their wants and needs too. But communication becomes powerful when the child discovers my words or my AAC gestures, signs, or whatever communication systems they use actually change my environment. So a lot of time with ABA, we do requesting first or manding because of the motivation factor, because we know that they are motivated for this thing. So if they really like juice, for example, so if they're requesting juice, it's like, oh, I asked for juice and I get juice. So now they know that it has a meaning. It actually changes their environment. So I ask for something and I get something. So the likeliness, because it's reinforcing, it's likely that they're going to use it in the future, because that's what reinforcement is, meaning that they're more likely to ask for the certain thing or do the certain thing in the future because they got something that they wanted. So they were very motivated to get juice. And then, for example, like help. If I say help, somebody helps me. If I appropriately say break, I can access a break when appropriate. If I say stop, the adults around me listen when possible. If I ask for attention appropriately, I can get somebody's attention. Now communication has value. So I always say make it functional. So is it functional? We're not just teaching someone to produce a response because it's written in a treatment plan. So we're teaching you have a voice and here's how you can use it. And I just also want to reiterate, as far as treatment plans, they should be individualized and meet the needs of the individual. So everyone's treatment plan should look different based on the individual needs. So another huge one is transitioning. Parents hear about transitions constantly in ABA, but transitions just aren't, okay, therapy's over, put the puzzle away. Transitions, real life, can be messy. It's turn off roadblocks, we're leaving. Bath is over, it's time for school, grandma's leaving, we're not going to McDonald's today, the park is closing, and sometimes the hardest transitions are transitions away from something really good. Think about adults. If you're watching the last 10 minutes of a show and somebody walks in, shuts it off, the TV, and says, we're leaving now, you probably wouldn't love that either. So maybe we use a timer. Maybe we provide a warning like, hey, I got 5 more minutes, right? 10 more minutes. Maybe we tell them what's happening. Maybe we give appropriate choice. We're leaving in 5 minutes. Do you want to go down the slide one more time or use the swings? We're still transitioning, but we're also providing a choice, and let them know what their last activity can be. We're also teaching predictability, communication, flexibility, and choice. Sibling interaction. So if they have siblings are great for another place where ABA may not even look like therapy at all, because siblings can be unpredictable. A therapist might carefully create a turn-taking activity. A sibling will take the toy wanted, change the rules halfway through the game, tell you you're doing something wrong, and then somehow becoming furious because you looked at them. Welcome to advanced social skills training. But seriously, those interactions give us opportunities to work on asking for a turn, waiting, sharing, maintaining personal space, responding to another person's communication, handling losing, asking someone to stop, negotiating, repairing interactions when something goes wrong. And a provider doesn't necessarily need to control all of those interactions. Sometimes our job is to step back enough for the interaction to actually happen while still being available to prompt or support when needed. Because ultimately, we don't want the child to know how to interact socially when a therapist is standing 3 feet away telling them what to say. Prompting without becoming a child's GPS. So that brings me to prompting. Prompts are incredibly useful, but sometimes we're focused on preventing an incorrect response that we don't give the child enough opportunity to respond independently. Imagine having someone follow you around all day saying, get your shoes, other foot, backpack, pick it up, put it on, come here, sit down, hi, say thank you, ask for help. So this might be really good in the beginning, and it really depends on the individuals and the skill level that they are. Maybe they need the extra prompting and support. But at some point, you don't want them to become prompt dependent, and you don't want somebody else to navigate your entire day. So part of teaching a natural environment is learning when to wait, give the child the opportunity. Maybe they know what comes next. So giving an opportunity for independence, because ultimately that's the goal, right? Is to be able to do so. If we're working on putting shoes on, the goal is for them to put shoes on independently. So giving the opportunity to wait is important. Maybe they know what comes next. Maybe they can solve the problem. Maybe they can initiate communication without us ultimately telling them what to say. Independence requires opportunities to be independent. Of course, real life also means challenging behavior can happen in real environments. And this is where I think it's most important for parents to understand that we're not necessarily trying to create a child who never becomes upset. That's being human. Frustration is human. Not like any answer is human. The question is, what can we teach that helps a person navigate that situation more successfully? If access to something isn't available, can they choose something else? If something is too difficult, can they ask for help? If they need space, can they request a break? If someone is bothering them, can they communicate stop? If plans change, what supports them to tolerate that change? Sometimes behavior tells us that a person doesn't yet have an effective enough alternative. And that's where teaching becomes so important. Parents don't have to become therapists. So I don't know if that's a popular opinion, but I really want the parents to hear that. You don't have to become your child's RBT. Your home does not need to look like a clinic. You don't need a clipboard following around your house. You're a mom, you're a dad, your grandma, you're the caregiver. Your relationship matters. A part of ABA should be to help you identify strategies that can actually fit into your family's life. So some of the things like may not fit in. So maybe things like bath time is difficult. So let's work there. I would say, let's do one strategy at a time. Where is it that your child needs most? What area? So wherever it is, you can work from there. Maybe getting out the door every morning is chaos. Let's work out the routine. Maybe restaurants are almost impossible because waiting is difficult. Okay, how can we build this skill gradually? Maybe your child desperately wants to play with their siblings, but doesn't know how to enter the game appropriately. So that's really meaningful. Those goals can change the quality of life for the whole family. For the RBTs listening, the RBT listening to this, don't underestimate naturalistic teaching. It can actually require tremendous amounts of clinical skills. You can recognize opportunities quickly. You don't have to know everything, but it's important to understand the functions of behavior and when to prompt, when to wait. Have to recognize the reinforcements that naturally exist in the environment. So it does take a skill set, and it does take clinical skills. And sometimes, like, I had an RBT one time who was running. I said, did you know just ran like 3 goals right now? And they're like, no, I had no idea. So, it was like following directions and waiting and accepting alternatives. And I'm like, yeah, you just ran like all of those goals. So being able to recognize that in the natural environment is really important too. And, taking feedback from your BCBA too, I think is really important. And for being able to also share what it is that you are struggling with too. So if you're also struggling, or if you want to see more growth in a certain area, being able to communicate that with your BCBA as well. Something works beautifully during structured teaching, but completely falls apart in the community, make sure to let your BCBA know. That's a really important piece. We're not trying to create skills that only exist during therapy, or I should say it is during therapy also, but not just existing during discrete trial training. So we want to create those goals. And then after we're gone, we want to be able to instill those goals too. And BCBA, sometimes we need to ask ourselves, where does the skill actually need to happen? If we're teaching personal space, let's observe interactions with actual people. If we're teaching community safety, let's go to the community when clinically appropriate. And when we're teaching transition, let's observe meaningful transitions. If we're teaching social skills, let's look at the natural opportunities in peers and siblings. If we're teaching functional communications, let's make sure the communication we're teaching is actual functional for the individual. And during supervision, don't just watch, model. So showing the RBT, give behavior-specific praise when implemented strong. I actually have trouble sometimes being hands-off because I want to model a lot of skills, and I think sometimes like a lot of us might struggle with that too. So I think it's also important to model, but it's also important to watch and observe our RBT. Provide corrective feedback when something needs adjustment. Probe whether prompts can be evaded. Look at whether a skill is generalized. Supervision shouldn't simply be the BCBA being physically present. It should improve treatment. Ultimately, I think successful ABA should sometimes become harder to see. So not that we're hiding anything, but that we want those skills to be a part of everyday life. We want it to be able to blend into everyday life. A visual schedule helps the morning go more smoothly. Child independently asks for help. They wait while mom finishes a conversation. They tell their siblings, I need space. They tolerate leaving the playground. They order their own food. They ask for a teacher for clarification. They recognize something isn't safe. They advocate for themselves. And eventually, maybe the therapist doesn't have, or the RBT or BCBA doesn't have to prompt it. Then maybe the parent doesn't have to prompt either. And one day the person just does it. So it's independently. That's the point. The goal isn't to become really good at ABA. The goal is to build skills and make progress to become as independent in these skills as possible, to replace some of those target behaviors reduce them, and increase your acquisition skills, and eventually become as independent as possible. The goal is to build skills that matter. It should have significance in that individual's life, and maybe even in the family's life too. It's like, hey, this is really important. This is something I notice they really struggle with. Like, so it should be important and something that you want to see your child be successful with. So this week, whether you're a parent, RBT, BCBA, teacher, caregiver, I just want you to look at one ordinary moment. Don't manufacture anything, just notice it. Maybe it's making breakfast, playing with a sibling, walking through a parking lot, getting dressed, waiting for dinner, leaving the playground, and ask yourself, what meaningful skill is already happening here? Because sometimes the best teaching opportunity doesn't look like ABA or therapy at all. It just looks like life. So thanks for hanging out with me today on ABA Mom. If this episode helped you, share it with somebody else. Like I said, I love to keep this free. So the more listeners and the more subscribers that, I appreciate you guys for listening in. And remember, ABA isn't just something we just do at the table. Skills we're teaching are meant to travel with a person long after the table and eventually after the ABA providers are gone. And just remember, you are not alone on this journey. Thanks for listening.